Construction Week is one of the largest circulated construction magazine in India, one of the largest circulated construction magazine globally. It presents across 7 geographies. We have editions in English, Arabic, and recently we have launched our Hindi edition to cater to a larger Hindi-loving audience. Let me come back to today's topic. Construction Week presents digitization and collaboration of requirements, compliance management, and validation of rail project powered by IBM and Microgenesis. India has emerged as the fastest growing market for urban rail systems. Currently, 10 plus cities have an operational urban rail network spanning 536 kilometers. The network has grown significantly over the past 12 to 13 years, up from about 90 kilometers in 2006. In the last 5 years, 13 new metro projects with a total length of around 248 kilometers have been approved. Further, about 750 kilometers of metro rail network and 373 kilometers of rapid rail transit network is under planning in various cities. And India is poised to become the hub for rail-related transport. And the world is keenly looking at us. But last 18 to 20 weeks have changed our world drastically. Not even in the last several decades we have transformed at this speed. COVID-19 is one of the most severe public health and economic crises the world has faced in the 21st century. The ongoing pandemic has brought massive disruptions to all industries, and even the rail industry has not been spared. We are suddenly stuck with project delays, labor overruns, cost overruns, supply chain problems, safety issues, new guidelines, and many such challenges. The emphasis of embracing new technology and digital solutions has never been much greater, and it may come to our rescue now. Keeping this in mind and considering the number of rail-related projects coming up in the country and adhering with the dream of Digital India, today we are going to discuss and debate what are some of the challenges we face while implementing these projects manually, and how digitization and technology can help overcome all these challenges, speed up projects while maintaining quality, standards, and budget. We want this session to be interactive and engaging, and we look forward to learn from our audience as well. In case if you have any questions during the course of the session, please feel free to ask them by using the question tab. We have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We'll be able to answer you then, like my team will get in touch with you. Without any further delay, let me introduce our presenting partner, Microgenesis and IBM, whose technology is powering several rail-related projects across the globe. Thank you, Microgenesis and IBM, for partnering with us and helping us put together this forum. Now, let me introduce today's moderator, Mr. Dhananjaya. Dhananjaya is VP Technical Services at Microgenesis TechSoft Private Limited. With more than 25 years of experience in this field, he's the authority on the subject. So let me hand it over to Dhananjaya. Over to you, Dhananjaya.
Thank you very much, Indrajit, and welcome you all once again. And I'm very privileged to be part of this particular webinar. And I'm 100% sure you will have something to take back home after this webinar, intense webinar. So, okay, let me just start. First, let me just talk about the subject itself. Why did we call it as a digitization and collaboration of requirements, risks, compliance, management, and validation for rail projects? There were three important reasons, basically. One, rail projects can be an infrastructure project, or it can be a rolling stock project, or it can be signaling systems, or an entire RFP process for construction or delivery assurance. That's one of the angles that we wanted to cover, which requires a massive digitization and collaboration initiatives. Second, most of clients, just like you all, would like to express their desire to collaborate more, understand from each other, shared like-minded, thought processes through this particular forum. That's another intention. And third most important thing is, everybody wants to hear what others are doing, and especially in this digitization or automation, or in terms of collaboration in the civil engineering space or infrastructure projects, or rail or metro projects. And this was the main reason why we wanted to have this particular webinar. So most of you would basically understand what are some of the key digitization initiatives that are taking place across the globe, and we also understand from an Indian context through our panel members. We have eminent panelists today. Multiple people have joined us today, and we will have some fruitful discussion with them as well to understand some of the challenges that the industry is going through, particularly rail and metros. And secondly, what are some of the interesting digitization initiatives or automation initiatives that have that have taken place, and also some of the key messages for others to follow. And some of the key topics that you would also get as takeaways is basically some of the, let's say when you're managing the huge, specification for rail or metro projects, you definitely need to know, you need to have some ways of notifying each one of the stakeholder about the changes to the specification. So how it is effectively managed through this, automation implementation. So we'll see how it is done. And then tracking and tracing of various rail projects artifacts, such as it could be your specifications, or it could be verifications, validations, or any other artifacts which needs to be tracked and traced. And then we do have some aspects talked on quality assurance and validation, because many of the things you need to do on field. So how that can be mapped back to the original specification, because that's what a compliance that we would need to manage. And we would also see how risk, hazards, and compliance management can be effectively managed. And definitely, so we will also see how requirements management can be effectively managed, and changes to the original requirements and impact analysis, how it is managed. So we see all these topics in a bit. Okay. So, and let's go to the next. If you have to look at the agenda, we will probably start off with a quick case study from one of our colleague in Australia, because we have done multiple rail and metro projects, and it may be an interesting thing for us, all of us as audience, to see what work has been done by IBM in these projects. And then we will quickly move on to a roundtable where we discuss on some of the challenges and some digitization initiatives, and also benefits and key messages for the audience. And then we will quickly take a look at the platform of IBM, which is helping rail projects. And so Mr. Iran is going to do a presentation on that. And we also have a sneak peek of our live demo of this platform, and followed by a question and answer session that we will have. Okay, now just before we get onto the speaker introduction, I just want to, a little bit of housekeeping things. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. We will answer each one of these questions towards the end of the presentation or the session. We will bring them up during either presentation or at the end of the session. So we'll ensure that so we'll ensure that all the questions are answered in this particular session. If not, we will respond to them later. And then, so let's get started. And then I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our first speaker, and this is Dhananjaya. So I think already Indrajit has introduced me, so I'm going to moderate this webinar for you. And Mr. Andreas Goshwin, who is basically an IBM solution engineer and works out of IBM Australia. So I'd like to just tell a quick brief profile about Andreas, so before he takes it over from me for presenting a case study for us. Andreas at IBM basically develops and deploys productivity improvement programs for various system development projects based on a framework called a capability assessment. He's currently based in Sydney, but his focus is on the transportation, the automotive, aerospace, and defense industries. And he basically actively gets involved in some of these areas, such as creating business cases for process and capability improvements, and planning and digital transformation initiatives for many of our large clients, and also gets involved in assessing technical risk and implementation recommendations for mitigation of some of the risks that may arise due to these transformation initiatives. Andreas, without any further delay, over to you.
As Dhananjaya said, I will just very briefly go through a couple of case studies we had in Australia. We had a similar event as today in Australia probably 3 weeks ago. And again, like Dhananjaya said, it was because we couldn't do a face-to-face conference in 2020, so we did a roundtable seminar, very similar to this one. The nice thing was about 160 clients registered, and these come from around 65 customers. So you see here the names and the logos of these customers, so quite well-known companies there. So the first case study was from Rail Projects Victoria. So they're a government agency under the Department of Transport in one of the states, Victoria, and they have the train projects underneath them, so tunnels and airport rail links and all these things. And so a while back, they decided, well, we need to manage these projects better. And they decided to create a requirements management framework. And here you see sort of a high level structure of that. And you know, Iran later on will go into a bit more detail. But you see here on the highest level government stakeholder point of view, these are sort of the placeholders for those stakeholder requirements. Then it goes down into system requirements with you know, standards around that. Then it goes one level deeper into the technical requirements, and then the finest level is then, you know, the package contractors and the associations that deliver things. So they have requirements as well and specifications as well. So you see this requirements management framework that Rail Projects Victoria requires. Everyone is working on that same framework, and that saves them a lot of trouble and improves the efficiency. So one of these, so that was the first presentation we had. The second one was from one of their projects, the Metro Tunnel. And you see here, you know, they're building a tunnel under the city. And of course, that entails that you have tunnels and stations, rail systems, infrastructure, and all these things. What they were doing on top of this requirements management framework is, how do we verify that we've actually built the right thing? So using those requirements they had in the beginning, well, we need to do some verification on that. And so they're using one of the components of the IBM solution to verify and make sure that everything is delivered the way it's specified in the requirements. So that was quite interesting as well. The third project is a different state. It's from Queensland, up in Brisbane. And again, they're building a cross-river rail project. And again, you know, they're the high-level view of it. They have all these specifications and documentations in documents, and they wanted to have one source of truth, as a single source of truth, as they call it, put it in a system so everyone, you know, if there's a change in one document, everyone knows about what the changes are. And so they talked about how that works, and that was quite interesting. And they showed, you know, how the various stakeholders work together. So from Queensland Rail, the councils, the utility providers, emergency services, and all work on the same set of data, which is really, really cool, right? And the final project that we talked about was one in Queensland and in New Zealand. And that talks about, you know, if you have this systems V from these hierarchies of requirements and all the verification that you need to do, how do you do that? And they sort of explained how they link from the right side of the V to the left side of the V, and talked about this V model in quite much detail. So my takeaway from listening to these presentations, you know, one requirements framework for all stakeholders involved, from the highest level, you know, transport authority down to the actual contractors. If you have that in place, it saves a lot of trouble and hassle. Doing collaboration supported by a tool and not through emails or letters or documents, that is something they all talked about and said that's really valuable. the verification of the system, how it's delivered, and how they manage risks and standards and hazards. So that was quite interesting. So just high-level view of a couple of these cases. If you want more information, happy to talk about that maybe later.
And I'd like to just quickly summarize what Andreas spoke about. And basically, I think he covered how the Australian rail authorities are using this particular platform basically in multiple angles. One is to manage the requirement specifications, number one. Number two is basically managing the verifications and validations. Third is to manage risks, compliance, and also hazard management. And this works as a central requirements repository where it allows all the other stakeholders, including consultants, contractors, the other rail bodies or dependent bodies which needs to support the project, can effectively collaborate on the same common source of truth. And I think that was an interesting piece of case study. And I think you had showed about 3 or 4 of them. It was interesting to note that the solution is being adopted in multiple projects and tested on multiple scale of projects. And thank you, Andreas, once again. Next topic is on a panel discussion, and I have the opportunity to introduce the eminent panelists that we have today, and I'm really very thankful for all of them to make it to this particular webinar today. And I'd like to start off with Mr. Pramod Ahuja. And thank you so much for being with us today. And Mr. Pramod Ahuja is basically a master's in civil engineering and MBA in relevant field of Masters of Public Policy in Korea. And he did join Secretary to CAO in Western Railways in 2005. And he was primarily responsible for preparing tender documents, vendor selection, project management of underground as well as elevated metro projects, including tunnel, and complete project and interface management with electrical signaling operations. For example, like Line 8 project, which included 20 kilometers of funnel and 5 underground stations, etc. And presently, he's the director for works in Metro Project Implementation Unit at Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development, which is MMRDA in short. Thank you, Mr. Pramod Ahuja, for joining this forum today. And our next panelist is Mr. Sudhan Gupta. He's the Deputy Chief Mechanical Engineer at the prestigious Indian Railways. He's actually the IRSME officer in 2008 batch as well. And he worked at various capacities at Indian Railways since the last 10 years, was in charge of the Deep Rug Railway Workshop and multiple other facilities. And his expertise in manufacturing, maintenance, and operational aspects of diesel locomotives and coaches of Indian Railways, presently working on specialized projects pertaining to modernization concepts being implemented in Indian Railways. I think we are able to visualize what Sudhanshu is working on, because we see that a lot of new modernizations are coming up in the Indian Railways. And thank you so much for being with us. And I think both Mr. Pramod and as well as Mr. Sudhanshu will basically bring in the view of rail body or rail authority to this particular panel. So next, I have Mr. Nalin Gupta. And thank you so much for joining us today. And he's a member of Indian Institute of Bridge Engineers with experience of more than 2 decades. And as a MD of J. Kumar Infra Projects, he has assured constant innovation and technical empowerment under his supervision for the company. And he's the brain behind elevated and underground metro projects and setting up piling division for the company. And he overlooks the projects, handling the technical, commercial aspects of promising better prospect for of the ever-expanding vast empire of this company. And he believes in challenging your limits. And I think that's very true. And when you challenge your limits, that's when you know your real potential. And thank you so much once again, Mr. Nalin, for joining this forum. And he would bring in the contractor's perspective to this particular panel discussion. Next, we have Ms. Ritu Singh. Ritu Singh is a software engineer with more than about 14 years of experience in IT software development, specifically in transportation sector. Currently, she is working as AGM IT in National Capital Regional Transport, Corporation, or in short, NCRTC. She is responsible for bringing in digital transformations in pioneering projects and rapid rail transit systems in India. Prior to this, she had worked as senior software engineer in CRIS, which is an IT arm of Indian Railways. And she also possesses, strong knowledge in cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence and data analytics. Thank you, Ritu Singh, for joining us today. And she will bring in the perspective of how IT, the support system, is critical for bringing in any digital innovations or digital transformation into any of these projects. And then we have Mr. Karun Sareen. Karun Sareen is the director with KPMG's major project advisory practice. And he brings over about 19 years of professional experience, has rich experience of conceptualizing, bidding and implementation of large-scale urban transport projects such as rails and metros. And in KPMG, current lead specialist consulting team, who basically is project owners, investors, and financials and bankers, etc. And prior to KPMG, Karun has been involved in metro rail project for almost 10 years, right? And then, with L&T. And Karun was also a former employee of BHEL. And Karun is a qualified engineer and MTech from IIT. Right. So thank you so much, Karun, for being with us today. And so he will actually bring in the perspective of consultant for this rail project. And I think we have a great panel today, and we would like to start off a question, and so let's have an insightful discussion today. And I have a first questions to Mr. Sudhanshu. Sudhanshu, from your perspective, what challenges do you see in rail industry? Because you represent a prestigious Indian Railways, and so in relation to driving some of the transformational initiatives within your business, you're responsible for some of the digital initiatives. And what do you think are some of the challenges from your perspective? Sudhanshu?
This is regarding the challenges while we are implementing mainly the digitalization and IT related perspectives in Indian Railways.
Yep.
And let's start with, there are two aspects here. One is what I can speculate or foresee, that what problems or challenges we might be facing in railways, and what my experience have been since the last 10 years in the field in railways. So first of all, what I can tell you from my experience, what we are implementing presently in regard to digitalization, it's Industry 4.0. That too in a very mass scale. Because in railways, whatever happens, it happens on the mass scale basis only. We are a big organization, and on pan-India basis, if we try to implement, it's a big thing first of all. The basic problems, I was at Dibrugad Railway Workshop in Assam for 2 years. Basic problem that we faced was, but when it comes to a pan-India basis, when it comes to basically changing the culture of any organization, when it comes to manpower, Indian Railways is not a very progressive organization in a way, age-wise. For example, in any IT industry or any IT sector, mostly young people are there. That is what I feel personally. But when it comes to Indian Railways, in railways, what happens is when a person joins railways at any level, then he normally doesn't foresee of changing his field or job. So he's retiring from railways only. So what that happens, that normally in any workshop or any organization, we are having not more than 10% of youngsters. Youngsters means up to 30, 35. Most of the people are more than 35, and more than 50% of them are above 40, 45 maybe. So recently, with these advance in technology, digitalization and concepts, inculcating or incorporating those changes for those people, that's the biggest challenge in my opinion. And that is the challenge that I faced when it came to collecting the data. We were having 20 different machines in our workshop, and we wanted to interlink them, all of them, with the help of Industry 4.0. And for that, we were generating data out of those machines, fault codes, etc. And first of all, if we want to process the data, we have to collect the data. After collection, the main challenge that we faced was data processing. So for that, we need some specialists. And for those specialists, we have to train people, we have to find people. These are, in a way, you can say not much of a challenge, but these were challenges that we had to encounter in order to incorporate digitalization in our workshop. As an organization, what I see as a whole, the main problem that railways will have to encounter in coming future is the extent. The extent means it's an extensive organization incorporating different types of cultures, different geographical regions. So making everyone understand on pan-India basis that this is the thing that we want to do. For example, Industry 4.0, making everyone understand in North, East, South, Central India, and with totally different cultures. For example, in Assam, the workshop opens at 7 a.m. But in Rajasthan, it's not the same. So making everyone understand, that will be the biggest challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that elaborate answer, Sudhanshu. I think you brought in totally about three dimensions to this. One is basically digital or transformation initiatives, which is key for modernization of Indian Railways. Second, the IT support that is needed to, make it a large implementation, because you have complete India's implementation. Indian Railways is spread across complete India. And third most important thing that you talked about is the cultural aspect. Each one of these regions behave differently and things like that. And I think, and it's quite suited for this particular forum, that just depending on an earlier approaches may not solve or bring in any new digital transformation. So you must go the automation way. You must bring in some of the IT initiatives which can basically, adopt the new cultures, so that the common culture that is basically spread across the Indian railways and digital initiatives. Thank you, Sudhanshu. I'll come back to you for next question later. And I have my next question to Mr. Pramod Ahuja. Mr. Pramod, what have been the biggest barriers to seeing innovation projects succeed? Meaning, most of these metros and rail projects, and you have particularly have driven some of the challenging projects. So what do you think are some of the biggest barriers, according to you, in seeing some of these innovation projects succeed?
See, metro sector in India is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
So the knowledge bank for the metro sector primarily comes from the Indian railway sector. Indian railways have an extensive established network, and they have their own research wing. They have their own training institutes. Whatever engineers they are taking in, they are extensively trained, and their knowledge bank is pretty solid.
Yes.
But this being a very big organization, and as Sudhan, as the other speaker just said, that being such a large organization, there is a little bit of rigidity also in the system. You have to match so many things from east to west, north to south, and it becomes very difficult to implement something new. So that metro sector also has borrowed its knowledge primarily from railways. And while the railway have their own way of training its people, and then experience also, as you told, that people are sticking with the railways, a lot of experience is there. It's an old organization. The same thing is not true for the metro sector.
Yeah.
There is a shortage of talent here. Whatever knowledge has come, it has been borrowed from railways, but there is definitely a shortage of talent. There has been an explosion of metros all across the country in the last 50-20 years.
Right.
But nothing has been done to provide the required knowledge in that area. That is one constraint I feel.
Okay.
Another thing is happening. Another thing that I feel is many things across the country are. There is a little bit lack of standardization, I feel. When it started, it was only Delhi Metro, and then whatever they did, that was the standard. But gradually, more and more cities joined it, and they initially followed Delhi Metro, but they had their own innovative ideas also. Now, that is in a way good. Then more innovation is coming. But again, in some ways, I believe that some standardization at certain levels is required.
Yeah.
These things, I believe, are a little bit of constraint in the metro sector. But as we go down, I hope these problems are going to get addressed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pramod. I think you quickly summarized it very well, in the sense you mentioned about Indian Railways has a lot of knowledge base to kind of past experience to basically take any decision in the future. But in case of metro, it is an early born baby, and a lot of cities have started adopting metro concept, and there is a lack of knowledge sharing that's happening. So I fully agree with you. I think there is some bit of platform that is definitely needed to share these knowledges, and that's what we are exactly trying to do, trying to bring in the experiences that we had with the other countries and try and take whatever is meaningful for us from implementation of these metros. And thank you very much for that beautiful answer. And my next question is to Ms. Ritu Singh. How do you manage a collaboration between consultant, contractors, and stakeholders? Are there any challenges here? Because you have these are multiple stakeholders which need to collaborate often to make projects very successful.
Yeah, thank you, Dhananjaya, for that question. Just before I answer that question, I would just like to give a glimpse about what exactly NCRTC is and what we are doing to set the context, actually. So NCRTC, National Capital Region Transport Corporation, is basically a joint venture company of Government of India and various states, that is Delhi, Haryana, Rajasthan, UP, which works under the administrative control of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So you see there are a lot of stakeholders which are involved, and then we are mandated for implementing country's very first regional rapid transit system RRTS project across the NCR region of India. And our objective is to ensure a balanced and sustainable urban development through better connectivity and access in the National Capital Region, which is one of the most important economic hub of our country. See, we are basically doing first of its kind project, even though we have little references from various other metros, but technically or technology-wise, it is very different from what metros are doing. As far as digital transformation is concerned, NCRTC, the digital transformation journey, specifically in transportation industry, has gone through major milestones in recent years. The current era of industry, as other speaker have also mentioned, it's witnessing the fourth industrial revolution with core emphasis on basically data and integration. For providing enhanced accessibility and collaboration among the different stakeholders that we have. So with this, NCRTC is committed towards bringing about transformations in mobility sector, right from the planning phase to the project execution phase and to the operations phase. NCRTC is leveraging cutting-edge technologies and processes to bring about this digital transformation in this domain. Just to give an example, as soon as COVID situation cropped up, we adopted mobile-based attendance for all our employees. So we capture the geolocation and the facial image, and then mark the attendance. So those are few things. I mean, few initiatives which we are taking in slowly but steadily, and the advantage that we have in our organization is it's kind of a greenfield project. So we have a lot of areas to try and test the new technologies that are there, as well as learn from the challenges which other metros have gone through, and how we manage this collaboration between the various stakeholders, which are both internal as well as external. So I would just like to highlight that the need for a single central repository of all the requirements or decisions, along with the change history of how or when and why those decisions were taken, that was felt very in very initial stages of planning of this project. And hence we have set up a common data environment, CD, which forms a central repository of all the technical documents that we have, be it 3D BIM models or the 2D drawings or any kind of technical documents that we have. But having said that, this tracking is essentially at the document level and not specifically on every requirement that we have. So I feel that could be a challenge in the current setup. But I would also mention here that the project phase that we are right now in, basically in this phase, we can set few processes, and manually this is controllable. Managing your requirements and all, that's how we have experienced. But as we move on to the operations phase, which is wherein the impact of any change in the requirement is more serious and more challenging, at that point of time, I feel requirement collaboration using some tool and with some systematic approach would be a better idea to go for. Because one single requirement would have impact on multiple subsystems and then stakeholders, which need to be collaborated, right? Yeah. Also, I would like to add in here, in continuation to what Mr. Pramod Ahuja sir was saying, there is also requirement of building a knowledge base across the various metro system, as you also supported that. Because if I just give you an example, most of the metros have their own asset management system on an ERP implementation that they have, and the processes and the systems that are being implemented are almost standard across all these metros, because the asset maintenance processes that are being followed, and inspection processes and inventory management processes are almost same in everywhere. Sure. But then every organization starts from zero. We start planning for an asset management system by seeing how exactly it will work and what processes have to be there and so on. So there's need for a common knowledge base wherein we can define a standard processes, so that everyone has a reference point to look at too, and everyone is not reinventing the wheel again and again.
Thank you very much for Ritu for that elaborated answer. In fact, just to summarize what Ritu said about importance of having a central platform to collaborate, and having requirements and impact analysis done at the early stage can save you many, rework and things like that. So thank you very much. And I think that's an important point that we would also cover during the presentation. I think Iranis will be covering that particular topic in more in detail. And without further delay, I'd like to quickly move on to the next panelist, Mr. Nalin Gupta. You, from a contractor perspective, risk and hazard managements are very, very key, because then ultimately any projects that you undertake after you construct and make it operational, some of these are important aspects that you have to comply with. How are these risks and hazards managed today? And do you see a need to improve the way it is managed?
So J Kumar, as just to have a small background of J Kumar, we are one of the leading infrastructure companies specialized into metros, flyovers, and mainly structural works. This entire digitization, I would say, is a very good concept, which should be taken forward and which is the need of the time. Because as and when this COVID has made us all understand the value of time and also the limitations that we have for operating on a pan-India basis. Like ERP, SAPs, these are the regular models that has been used by various companies. And now the time is there where we have been using the digitalization in in many areas like you talk of BIM or LIDAR survey, electronic tendering systems, drones. You talk of 3D printing, artificial intelligence, ERP, SAP data integration, use of GPS. But still, there are a lot of like Pune Metro. I would, for that instance, I would like, because that's one of the department where we saw this modeling, which is the 5D modeling. So the entire systems are on a day-to-day basis. The data are uploaded on the system, whether it is for work executed, for RFIs, for pour cards, for each and every activity. So that becomes like, I would say, one of the very better way of operating, where the data is integrated at the same time on a real-time basis rather. And with regards to your question for risk management and hazard management, that we are following various methods like noise levels controlling, your lightning controllings, air contaminations, chemicals, radiations, air qualities, biohazards, air temperature, asbestos, vibrations, for which we have various systems available in the industry. But I would say the risk, hazard, and implementation assessment analysis, response, and planning monitoring system has to be standardized, as Ritu and Mr. Ahuja, they were already mentioning, that these systems has to become mandatory by all the government organizations. So everybody, like I would say computer was something very new. People weren't used to it. And in regular conventional typing machine, typewriter was a method of use. But now it is for even a small clerk, or rather let it be senior or junior person. Everybody is using computer as a very day-to-day basis, with maybe the limited knowledge that's required for his area. But similarly, digitization, I would say, if it's been made mandatory by all government organizations with respect to, I would say, like we have electronic tendering system. Now, any person sitting in any part of the world can bid in any part of the world, sitting in its home place, or maybe inside from his bedroom. So with proper security and proper management system that has been followed. Similarly, if these systems are followed for risk management, for day-to-day like data collection, like when we submit a bill, like we all EPC contracts, we are supposed to generate an monthly billing. When you submit a bill, you realize that this particular RFIs or the pour cards or the BBS or the related documents or the checklist which were being made time to time. But when you submit a bill, those documents are either not available with the contractor, or it is not available with the department or the general consultant. So if a digitization is done and it's been uploaded on a 5D beam modeling, or a system which is uploaded day to day, I think the whole process would be quite quick, quite fast. Like let's see video conferencing, which was existing, but was not a regular mode of operation for all of us. For this webinar, if I had to be there, we all would have gathered at a place. We would have lost a lot of time in the transportation, and for one meeting would be I would say, would consume more than half a day of yours. Right now, I'm sitting in one of the corporation office, and just because I knew my PA called up that, sir, you have to attend. So I just sat on a place and I'm doing this webinar. The time utilization and the efficiency levels have really gone up. And I think this is the need of the time where we all should go for this system.
Thank you, Nalin. Talking about various, areas where the digitizations have already taken place, and especially this COVID situation has taught us a big lesson of what's the importance of those digital initiatives. And I think this COVID has taught us how to think forward. What benefits you can gain out of digital initiatives that you can bring in, which can help the future generation as well. Thank you so much for nicely articulating that. Thank you very much. And I'll quickly move on to my next panelist, Mr. Karun Sharin. He will bring in the consultant view. As a consultant, it's important you kind of write your requirements, specifications, project specifications very clearly, because they are complicated. They are many in pages. So according to you, what are the challenges relating to managing rail project specifications or requirements from your experience, Karun?
So I think, rail projects are complex. I think they are complex simply because one project will mean implementation of multiple systems and packages. Most of the time, these packages are awarded to different contractors.
Yeah.
There is an ecosystem that has to be handled because metro projects or rail projects are linear in nature. So they have an interplay with a lot of stakeholders.
Yeah.
On top of it, you have different procurement and contract options for those packages. For example, in the Metro Policy,
Right.
it is mandated that some of these packages will have to be done on PPP. So while we have some packages in metro sector which are service contracts, some are supply contracts, some are works contract. There are some packages which have to be done on PPP.
Yeah.
So the requirements for each of them vary.
Yeah.
Is there a common platform where all these can come together so that there is nothing falling through the cracks, which is important.
Right.
Metro Rail, for example, there are so Metro Rail, as a minimum, there will be 7 or 8 packages, whether it is civil works package, systems, your track package, traction, electrical, AFC, signaling comms. So there will be different contractors who will be working on those packages. High speed rail, for example, has 26 packages, which is going up. So all these with different packaging strategy, different contracting strategy will need some common platform. So that is one. Then in terms of claims and counterclaims, because the authority would give out contracts to multiple contractors, and then one contractor delays, it has a follow-on impact on the next contractor. So there'll be claims by the contractor who's getting delayed, but this contractor which has delayed will have his own reasons for delay. The whole thing would sit back on the authority. I mean, the authority will be at the rough end of the stick between the two contractors. So I think a seamless strategy might be required so that once the ROW is given, all the obligations of the authority are complied with. It is between the various contractors how they interface. So the contracts have to be seamless in that fashion. I have not seen that happen. I've seen all the contractors putting claims and authorities struggling to manage this claim response.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Karun. I think you've just very beautifully emphasized the importance of having collaboration, centralized repository, like how all the other panelists have emphasized on. I think being a consultant, you know the pain because you have to ultimately work between two pillars. One is the rail agency or the authority, another is the list of contractors, and there are many contractors that will work for one single project. And it's so difficult to manage collaboration without having a common repository of information. And I think it was beautifully explained. And thank you so much for that. And we are running out of time. And I have one curious question that I want to ask Sudhanshu. Sudhanshu, what percentage of deviations you generally see due to unclear or conflicting requirements? Because Indian Railways, having massive implementations or any small unclear requirement can cause a big money. So, what do you think from your perspective?
Yeah, actually, in regard to digitalization, what railways can expect in the coming few years, in my opinion, it's quite simple. When it comes to rolling stock means coaching wagons. The perspective of mainly this government and rail minister is not into huge infrastructure related infrastructure expansion in a way. Expansion means every rail minister in the past used to say, I'll be running 4 new trains, 5 new trains, 20 new trains. In the last few years, we are not increasing or incrementing the number of trains. Instead, we are infusing a lot of energy on the improvement or enhancement of services. The customer experience, that's the most important aspect. So in regard to digitalization, what improvement in the experience that customer can face? So the interaction of customer is mainly when he sits in the coach of the train, he or she. And secondly, the interaction will be when, for example, I am booking a train, booking the train tickets and all. And those interactions, that is the main force or main driving force of railway officers and other people right now. And when it comes to enhancing that experience, so interiors of coach, needs to be worked upon. And in what way digitalization can improve that? For example, recently Indian Railways has implemented the concept of 3D printers in the coaching workshops. So the problem that we were facing was, for example, we are trying to procure something. So then it had to be procured via a long channel. Then inventory for other things, downtimes. If we have a 3D printer, small components can be immediately procured. And we will not have to compromise with the quality. The coach, as it is built, when it is released from workshop after maintenance, it should feel like new. That is the main concept. Also, customer comfort. And finally, when the comfort part is over, then it comes to services. We have the utilization. For example, the train tracks are fixed. Number of coaches may increase, but we have to increment the capacity utilization. In that regard, 3D modeling and other aspects can also help.
Okay, thanks, Sudhanshu.
So this is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Sudhanshu. I think we are running out of time, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for taking your time out for joining this webinar and sharing your wonderful experiences, that viewpoints. That I think it was so beautiful to have rail agency or rail board plus the IT support system plus consultant and contractors view to the entire rail and metro projects. And it was so beautifully narrated that the importance of digitization or the automation or having centralized systems, better ways to manage equipped for any kind of future situations was very well expressed in this particular webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank all of you, and we will meet you once again in one more webinar shortly. Right? Please stay on this webinar so that any questions that come in, which will be passed on to you panelists. Thank you so much. And without further delay, I'd like to quickly move on to our next topic. And so we have our next topic, which is on a presentation of centralized system for requirements management. So we will probably have Mr. Iran Gary cover that. And I'd like to quickly introduce Iran. Iran is basically a worldwide technical lead for IBM Products Engineering Solutions. And Iran is responsible to lead engineering practices and solution architectures, applying the engineering lifecycle management solutions to industries such as transportation, aerospace, defense, medical, multiple others. And in fact, he also works with key clients worldwide, applying these IBM solutions in their specific businesses, say, for example, transportation or infrastructure projects. And he's actually, specialization in both systems and software engineering practices. He comes with about more than 20 years of experience in managing this complex systems and software engineering lifecycle management. Iran, over to you for a presentation.
So what I will do in this session, after such a great introduction and motivation, and thank you for the panelists that basically some of them actually already said some of the things I was intending to talk about, and this is all the motivational background. I think Mr. Karun very nicely described this picture that you see here that talks about the complexity of these projects and the fact that these projects are multi-dimensional projects in terms of the types of packages, starting from pure construction packages going into equipment provision packages, signaling, rolling stock, and so on. And there are various stakeholders. And again, the stakeholders have also very different nature, depending on different package providers, the agencies, consultants, and so on. And overall, there needs to be lots of communication and agreement on requirements across all of those stakeholders, and the number of requirements can easily reach tens of thousands of requirements that need to be collaborated. some of the studies, and this is one of the construction journals of why this type of projects tend to get delayed and budget overruns. And as you can see, some of the reasons are misalignments between the owners and co-owners of the projects around the scope, around the requirements, rework that is necessary due to errors and inconsistency in specifications. Sometimes there are delays because there is lack of compliance to regulations, which are essentially also requirements, and statutory approvals gets delayed, and so on. So these all lead to most of these things. So efficiency of communication and precisions, the precision of how we attract the requirements and make sure that we satisfy them. So what's today's approach that we see is emerging in an area that used to be more around more traditional construction. And today's emerging approach is called the systems engineering approach. And system engineering is an emerging discipline. This is in across industries, not only construction and metro, but also other industries. If you look at how they construct, for example, the rolling stock and so on. And the idea of systems engineering, this is a discipline that is essentially about integrating all the specific disciplines like construction, like equipment manufacturing, and so on. So it basically sits above those specific implementation disciplines to make sure that they are all well coordinated and to get an oversight of all the different concerns of such a complex project. So this is what systems engineering is about. As you can see, it is, and Andreas already showed it earlier, it is depicted as this sort of, we call it the V, or this upside down triangle that talks about starting from specifying requirements at the overall system, going down in hierarchical way to specifying requirements of each one of the packages and so on, and then going back from the bottom in the process of verifying the requirements. So systems engineering is a discipline that is heavily relies on requirements management, requirements in the engineering, precise definition of requirements, and then it goes into practices on how to validate and make sure that all the package providers will actually they are properly fulfilling the requirements. Typical collaboration that you see in such projects, and the point of this chart is to see all the process of negotiating requirements, starting from the stakeholder early before the contractual phases, when the project starts. So there is the stakeholder that engages with a consulting company or a consultant that is detailing all the system level requirements and the technical requirements and so on. And then there is those are passed on to the package contractors. And before this whole thing starts, there basically needs to be an agreement between all those parties before the contracts are issued, and we are starting to basically execute the project. So there is a whole phase, as you can see here, that is early on before we even issue all the contracts. And during that phase, there's a whole negotiation between the stakeholder and then moving on to the consulting company, and then negotiating with the package contractor over the requirements and clarifying them and so on. And then we go into the execution. And during the execution of the project, it is very important to continue tracking with more of auditing the execution, making sure that the contractors are basically properly verifying and implementing the right requirements. So there's a whole orchestration of back and forth negotiation over lots of details, and this needs to be followed on very precisely. How it is done today? So today it is typically done using documents, and this is one of the main messages here, that documents are very coarse-grained. In one document, you can have something like, I don't know, 1,000 requirements, and they're very coarse-grained, and they are not very well interrelated. So if I'm changing something in one document, it may have an impact on something that exists in another document. And then the document have different natures. There are different documents just to talk about risks and hazards, and documents that talk about the functional requirements and so on. And typically, if we do it with a document, using documents, even if we are using a document management system, it doesn't solve the problem, because again, the granularity of the documents is too coarse, and they are not well interrelated. And we cannot see how changes in one document is impacting other documents. And this has all kinds of implication, as you can see here, and it results in finding lots of issues as we go towards the execution of the project. So now it's time to introduce the IBM requirements management solution that later on my colleague Sunil will give you a short demonstration. So basically, the IBM requirements management solution is a system that manages digital records in a very granular and precise way in a central repository where all the parties, and it could be 50 package contractors and consultants and stakeholders, all collaborating on those records in a central repository in a very granular way. So it's not a document. They don't collaborate at the level of a complete document. They collaborate on a single record, which could be a single requirement. So this granularity is very, very important, and the ability to collaborate at this level makes the difference between a traditional document-based process to this kind of digital record management system. It is based on it's a modern system using web technology. So in order to use the system, all you need is a web browser, and all the user interface and the collaboration interaction with this central repository is done with web browser. There's no need to install anything. So all the traditional burden of installing software and so on is not there. It provides multiple views of the information. And sometimes we like to look at information like a document, like you can see here in the picture at the top right. And sometimes we like to look at the information more as in a tabular way, or in sort of a graphical way, like you see here. And sometimes we would just like to aggregate information to get metrics. So there are multiple views that are generated from this central repository of digital records. It allows to basically for each one of the stakeholders to review and comment on each one of the records or the requirements. And this is very important because the whole negotiation over how we reach an agreement on a contract is digitized. So there is a whole process of reviewing, commenting, and this is all part of the digital system, and we can see the whole audit trail of how things got modified, and as a result of negotiating, or as a result of finding a need to modify the requirements. Another important aspect is data security. So I described like everyone can access everything, but that's not quite the case. We can definitely define security and access boundaries for different contractors to access their own relevant data and different stakeholders to have access to certain areas that we want them to be able to see. Take into account that those systems are also using by defense agencies, and in defense, this whole area of data security is very, very sacred. We can also produce documents. So it's not that everything is locked in that digital systems. There are many stakeholders that would like to see documents produced in a more traditional sense, like PDF documents. So it's very easy to decide what portion of the digital information should be produced into a document. This is done by push of a button. And the last thing, this is a very, very popular system that is used worldwide across multiple industries. And it's essentially a leading system for almost like 2 decades now. This system, how it fits with other systems you probably heard or you might be using, and some of the panelists mentioned 3D modeling or using systems like a BIM system, building information model systems, and project management systems. So the requirement management system complements the processes and all the data that is needed, all the contractual aspects that is needed, along with the project management and along with the systems that talk about designs like BIM systems. So the requirement management system is usually the source from which, after we know the requirements, we plan the project, and we use a project planning system, and it can interact with project planning system. And after we know the requirements, we can start to use building information management system to do the actual designs. But all those things rely, as you know, on the requirements. So the requirements management system is one basically pillar of this 3 types of data that we need in a project, which is the specification, the planning, and the actual designs. Looking a little bit on the system, and I'll go quick because Sunil will show it. One of the aspects, what you can see here on the left, you see a traditional document. On the right, you see what happens after this document has been imported into the system. So one of the views of the system and one of the ideas is for all those people, you know, the 45 years old and north, can continue to have the experience of managing data in a document. Now, the difference is that it looks like a Word document, but every section here, which is essentially represent the requirements, gets an identity, an identifier, as you see here on the left, and is managed individually. So we can tell exactly who touched this individual record, when it was modified, and we can associate lots of additional information around it, like you would see next. But the main thing is that we still provide the experience of a document-like user interface, and this is exactly to address the issue of the non-youngsters, and typically people that deal with contracts and requirements are not the youngsters. So there's this idea of giving a comfortable environment for people that are traditionally used to deal with documents. What we are doing, and these are the golden rules of how to deal with requirements. So first is to control, we call it controlling the inputs, and this is to get the stakeholder requirements, structure them, creating the right relationships among them, and then go through a process of review and approvals. And then controlling the outputs, at some point we need to issue documents, and so it should be very easy to produce the right document using the right set of data, which is based on a signed baseline of the data for the relevant stakeholders. So we are in full control in how we produce outputs from that system. And the last aspect is how we manage change. And that was also mentioned earlier, that as the project starts, it's very, very important to control changes and understand the impact of changes. And the system also helps to understand the impact of changes, which is very important, as mentioned by one of the panelists, because it can have very costly impact if we don't do it carefully. There are multiple aspects when we talk about these digital records, these requirements, like organize them in a hierarchical way. They have to be granular enough. So when we verify them or when we relate them, we know precisely which granular element we are referring to. There needs to be this what we call traceability. And traceability is a very important tool to make sure that everything is consistent. So what the package contractor is doing is consistent with the system level requirements, and this is all achieved through traceability. So all those requirements are linked across, and this is how we make sure that the requirements are basically implemented by, for example, a package contractor, and every requirement is covered by a package contractor, and so on. Collaboration, we mentioned. So collaboration is how a large number of stakeholders can all access this data and collaborate on it. I did mention also, and it's mentioned here, that we can define rules, access rules and security, who can access what, and we can define policies on who can do what. But in the end, the collaboration and the negotiation is all done using this digital system. Some other important aspect I mentioned, the ability to produce documents, we call it reporting. Very important aspect is to baseline. So the requirement, the specification are evolving, and we create new baselines, and it's very important to sign the baselines and also to see how the baselines are evolving with time. What's the difference with the new baseline of the requirement versus what was there last time after there was some negotiation? For example, something were changed, we create a new baseline. This whole baseline management is very important. And the last thing is to analyze the requirements. They are typically written in English. So the ability to analyze the requirement using natural language processing, AI technologies, is also very important, and you see it in the system. Illustration of how we organize the requirements, and this is actually taken from the Victoria project that Andreas was talking about. So typically those requirements and those digital records are organized in hierarchies. They're starting from records which are created by the stakeholders, and then going into the actual consulting organization that will elaborate them into system level requirements. And then we define the packages, and for every package there is a scoping and technical requirements. And then we define documents that go into the different package contractors. And they are all organized in this hierarchy, because in the end we need to see that whatever was delivered to a package contractor is resulting from a certain technical set of requirements at the overall system level. And then this tracks back to a general requirement that came from the stakeholders. So this whole idea of going from the package contractor, his package specification, all the way up to the high level stakeholder requirements is managed through this in the layers, and you see this traceability going across the layers. One more thing to mention is we use the term requirements, but requirements, these digital records can represent many things. They can represent, like we mentioned, records that talks about risks and controls. They can represent validation actions. We mentioned that after we start the project, we need to start with different validation activities. Once certain packages are started to implement. So during the execution, there's a whole validation activity, which we also specify as elements inside that system. And then we can specify things like interfaces between systems and so on. One important thing to mention is that this type of information, like you see here, is very, very flexible. So for some project, they tell us, but we also have this type of information, and we can create more types of digital records, and then the number of types of digital records we can create is not limited. We can it can be customized based on the specific needs of the organization. Last thing I want to talk about is the ability to analyze the requirements. So requirements are written in natural language, and natural language, can be used in many, many ways. The goal of the requirements, while they're written in natural language, is that they need to be precise and they need to be verifiable. And there are some practices to guide good requirements, for example, by the International Council for System Engineering in COSI. And in this system, we have a capability which is based on natural language understanding, which is an AI technology to analyze the English text that you have written and give you scoring on how well your requirements adhere to the guidelines. And obviously requirements with low scoring typically would be ambiguous, or it will be difficult to verify or to understand what they mean. Basically, you want, when you sign off the requirements, you want the scoring to be at a reasonable level. And with that, I think I will hand it off to Sunil, so we have time for some demo.
Thanks, Iran. Thank you. And I think it was quickly covered on how requirements management can be centrally managed, and a list of things which are related to impact analysis, traceability, collaboration, more importantly, which is how this platform enables to bring in that cultural change. In fact, you beautifully narrated even the challenge that Indian Railways has with the cultural shift. They are used to Word document, and the platform gives a very similar look and feel. It's kind of seamless migration from the traditional way to a modern way of managing requirements, made easy because you still retain the same look and feel, and they don't have to learn a whole new tool for them to come on a platform. Okay, so without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Sunil. Sunil is basically the IBM. He's with IBM for more than 15 years now. Sunil is a subject matter expert on IBM engineering lifecycle management solutions. In this role, he generally helps clients improve productivity, drive innovations by accelerating digital automation adoption in safety critical industries such as railways, metros, automotive, aerospace, defense, and medical. Sunil, over to you for a quick demonstration of the product that Iran covered. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dhananjaya. Thank you, Iran. And I'm actually glad that I have some data points which can be covered. What panelists has raised the concerns that what they want to see in the railways industry, how they want to get digitalization centrally, capture the information and share across. Though I planned the demo for having 7 scenarios, having said that, based on your interest, I would like to go it slow rather than making sure all the 7s have been covered. So the initial fact was to show you that how seamless you are seeing the data, how you're doing day-to-day work in a Word document, and how you're collaborating it. If the document is brought inside the system, how you're going to visualize it and seamlessly do the editing inside the system, how you will be doing in Word document, how it will be different, and so on. So, and then going forward, I'll be touching upon some of the nuanced capabilities, which you may not see in a Word document when you are trying to edit something or you want to create some attributes. You may probably rely on Excel sheets for that. But whereas when we are talking about a collaborative environment for requirement management in a single forum, you have documents can be managed, you can create n number of attributes, can be user specific or system specific, and then so on and so forth. So this is something which I have planned, and I will really go slow till the time Dhananjaya allows me to go forward with demo.
Maybe if we can wrap it in 10 minutes, it'll be great.
Sure. But again, Dhananjaya, I don't want to try to emphasize on all of them, but yeah, I will try to cover most of them on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
I think your screen needs to be on.
I'm actually having a collaborative platform. So consider that we have a collaboration platform like Box Folder, where you'll be sharing the data with your stakeholders, contractors, subcontractors. The data will be stored in the form of Word document. People will be downloading the Word document, putting their comments and so on. So let's download this document. So I've downloaded and kept it. So you have a document which really talks about the scope of work, and it talks about different subheadings and so on and so forth. So in most of the railways industry, we see that the document is already available. The thing is where to start. Do I need to re-engineer the entire document inside the system, or the system gives me a flexibility to basically reuse the data which is available? Of course, the tool is designed in such a way that the legacy work, what you have done, so much of hard work you've done, we can able to import those documents inside the system. And when the system brought the document inside, you see the look and feel of the system looks the same. So when the users are trying to see, the look and feel doesn't make any differences for them, the first convenient time is, it is not much, it is not different. We are becoming more agile and more digital. So the first feel is you get the system inside the document inside the system by a press of few clicks, like basically you will just say, create, or you want to import the document. So you have the options to basically get the documents inside the system by the option of import. And once the documents get imported, you have a very clear sections. You can see that how Iran was mentioning over single record. So you can basically see when they're moving the mouse, it will be in a single repository. And as I'm scrolling down, you have the entire document, the look and feel, how it is there outside of the system. And we have nice features on it where you can basically see the hierarchy at one level. So if you scroll down a bit down in the system, then you can see the earth structure, tunnel, station. Where if you want to do it in a Word document, probably it may take time. But whereas with this kind of features, enhancements over in the system, which we can expand, collapse the entire text of data, which is there at your disposal on a fingertips and clicking the information. You can enhance these documents once you are inside the system by creating the maps, associating the text with the map. So these are being connected to your maps, actual maps. So it makes the life easier for an engineer once the data is inside. And if he wants to know some explanation of any text, instead of going into the annexure, he can basically create on a fingertips what this explanation is. So this is one of the documents that there are several documents, as you can hear from their list. There are many documents which they have to manage. So in a rail project, typically I'm just giving the narration of general specification for stakeholders at a high level. Then we have consultant documents are there. And then subsequently the design requirement criteria documents. So these are the different documents which you can structure it. And this look and feel looks like just like an Explorer, very easy to navigate, very easy to capture the data in a very centralized format, and easy to basically see that the navigation becomes much easier. So let's go back to our module. So our module I was working on this one. So next enactment, what I'm trying to do here is, let's try to see if I can enter the data over here. So if I just say, if I've just performed the way you will be performing in a day-to-day works, you will be saying requirement 1, and then you can say requirement 2. So it is very easy to basically navigate the information. You can enter the data and so on and so forth. So these, apart from this, entering the data, and it's sometimes we feel that, oh, we have entered the data in a wrong place. So what you have to do, you have to do copy paste rather than you just drag and drop inside the system. So it will be basically changing the location, and within just minutes, it will just show you how the data is being moved from one location to another location. As you can see, just drag and drop. It makes the life of the engineer, life of a subcontractor, making the changes, making the text as promoting, demoting of the text. All those things are possible on a finger, on a click of a button. Easy way of editing the system and so on. Now, to make this document more sensible and make this document more appropriate, because we want to now consider this document as module inside our system. Now, what you're seeing here, we will no more call it as a document, we will call it as a module. Now, each row, each line, we call this as an atomic requirement. And it has to be having some emphasis that is this requirement is prioritized, it is approved, or it has been having a risk mitigation or hazard. So you can create your own type of attributes inside the system. I'm going to highlight some of the attributes which are called as systems attributes, some are user-defined attributes. So I'm just going to highlight some of them. So I'm going to pull out the priority of the requirements, and then I'm going to provide the status. There's no restriction in number of attributes which you want to add, and you can order them as you like to arrange the data points over here. So once the data points is arranged, you can reallocate the columns, and you are having all the information fingertips. Once this information is good to capture your risk mitigation, you can add as many columns as you can. So now what I'm showing you is, initially the data was only showing you the like a document module structure, but now with the addition of attributes, it's much more like your Excel sheet, which you rely on day-to-day basis to prioritize each requirement cell, atomic requirement, the weightage of it, approval of it, risk, everything in a single repository. It is there inside the system, but we are not showing everything to everyone. It is depending upon the stakeholder who is accessing the information. So once we understand we want to store this information, we have a nice button over here. We'll say, yes, I want to store it. I want to share it with other team members. And you can just say team view kind of information which you want to share across different team members. Now, what happens, the advantage of this view is, if you deselect it, it will go back to the parent document where it is showing the information. And whenever you want to see the priority of the information, you go back to the view which you just created. And this will give you a very comprehensive information saying that, okay, whatever information I wanted to capture is that. Now, once the data is there, people want to sort it out. We want to do a kind of calculation in terms of cost, quantity, and so on. All those things are possible. And in simple regards, if I want to filter any information, you can just specify the priority. And then you can say, I want to see all the ones which are in high priority, and say, okay. And then it lists the information which are high priority. And the moment you have this, again, you can create a view which is saying that it is high priority views, which is what the management want to see. And it is personal, not everyone should be visible to me. So based on the login, it will make sure that the views are only pertaining to that person rather than it is exposed to others. So you can, as you can see, there's a color combination. Green means the ones it is only visible to me. If someone else log into the system, he may not be able to see the information. So these are different views which you can create inside the system. Now, there was another important thing. Attributes are good where we know that for a particular requirement, how you have given the weightages. Now, we also know from eminent speakers, they mentioned that there are a lot of documents are there. And every document has to be linked in an atomic level so that it can be traced, it can be managed later on, and we have given confidence that we are compliant to a standard. For that, I can also illustrate this particular data set. What you are seeing right now is having 3 data points. General specification requirement, considered as a stakeholder. Technical specification, considered as a consultant document. Design requirement criteria document, considered as the subcontract requirement. There are 3 documents are there. Now I'm going to do one thing is establishing a traceability across them. So let me show you one of the traceability where we can see how we can establish the traceability. Right now, what I'm showing you, the traceability between the general specification document and the subsequent DRC and also technical specification. Now, to make more sense to this requirement set, I have created one view where you can clearly see that we have a high-level requirement, which is our stakeholder requirement general specification, and it is connected to a design requirement criteria along with the technical specification. And these link validation icons gives you a very handy information. Consider that the top level requirement, someone has made some changes. Okay, so let me make some changes to this text, override the locking method. So I will just change it. And once somebody makes the changes to the system, now you can see that immediately given a question mark stating that the linked requirements which are associated with the stakeholder to the subsequent DRC and TCS document, somebody made the changes. At least the management get an alert and engineer get an alert, someone made the changes. So that means we need to revalidate all the linked information in order to whether it is right or not. Probably I made a mistake over here and I can make a changes, but then again, the system will have to ask you why you made the changes, and you just say that I need to revalidate it, give a reason by mistake or so on. So there is always a historical information that never allows someone to just make anything and go away. They have to tell the reason why, and they can validate the link back, looking that this text was by mistake changed. So this gives you very handy information, which is very good. Now, same link data, if I just want to analyze in a different way, management always look for the information that, see, the traceability is established. Is there is any places where traceability is not established? So the term traceability we are using, but in a management term, gap analysis. So you can see here, the second line is not being traced to any requirements. So at least you can get to know in this tens of thousands of documents and thousands of records, lakhs of traceability links, if somebody can help you, at least tell you that where the links are not there inside the requirement, please work on it. Wouldn't be good. This is something you cannot achieve in a Word document. Somebody has to scratch his head, write the macros and so on. This is as good as fingertips, this information available, centrally being located, and all the people can see the information simultaneously, which is fabulous to have this. So this is something in terms of gap analysis from the same concept of traceability, looking into a management term, I feel it gap analysis makes sense. Now let's go on to other documents. I'm only playing with one of the documents. So you can see here, there's again nice way of doing it. There are hundreds of documents, but I'm focusing on the ones station module rather than tons of document which I want to see. So I can filter it. This is nice capability which you have, which again Word cannot achieve. And when I go to my middle document, which is considered as a consultant document, as you can see, they said again, we have general specification document, technical document, and the subsequent DRC document. Let's see this information in a pictorial representation. So we have nice way of seeing the information. As you can see, atomic level, how it has been linked. On a click of a button, it could be keep on expanding if the links have been associated. So this is something very useful. If some engineer comes in, make changes, a contractor comes and make the changes, wherever the links have been breaking, he can actually see the impact of the changes where it is. The early traceability concept, which I mentioned, was on the gap analysis. This one, looking at this particular pictorial, you can see how it can impact the changes if you are not being taking care of how the information flows. So this gives you very handy information to you, and you can make sure that things are being taken right. So this is something you have it out of the box inside the system. On a click of a button, these can be established. Now the question is, can we establish the links? How easily it is to establish it? It is just a matter of few clicks. So let me go back to my documents. So I have just filtered the documents on 3 sets. You can filter as many as you want. So I've just selected 2 documents in which I want to establish the traceability. I can select them. I can open these documents side by side to each other. And what I can do is I can just drag and drop the requirements from the ones which I want to connect. So I can just scroll down. This is our general specification document. This is our technical document of building and plumbing system. So I can just go down into the plumbing section. For time saving, I'm just taking a random collection. So I'm going to basically select the requirement from the general specification and drop it over to our requirements in technical specification. Once we establish, the link will be established and it will be shown over here into the sections. So this as good as drag and drop, and you have this information being traced to you. You can have this capability. Now, Once we are doing this data import, editing the information, seeing the attributes, seeing the linkages by gap and impact analysis, definitely you want to do the reviewing of the requirements because you need to have review panels do it. Now, in review panels, we have an option here. Out of the box, you can create your own reviews. So I've just created one for you where we have stakeholders. I can have multiple reviewers, multiple approvals. And you can also add the list of requirements which they need to review and approve. Now, the biggest advantage looking at this reviewer panel is it is not only showing who are the approvers and reviewers in the list, but you can also scroll down and see that you can see for atomic requirements, atomic line items, it can tell you the progress of it. So you will easily come to know what has been approved, what is being not approved, and this makes the life of the person who is approving, reviewing that how many has been left, how many has been approved. And you can also see in terms of percentile, which is very cumulative information.
Sunil, can you wrap it up in another 2 minutes, if that's
Yes.
okay? Yeah, thank you.
Sure, sure. And once all these actions are happening, and the business advantage will come in, like, can I see a consolidated view of all the actions which I was doing? Can I see it in a consolidated? Yes, with the help of our dashboard concept, where whatever I was making the changes or I was editing the thing, this is the page where you can create your own customized views in which you can see the project inside, what is this project meaning is. You can go ahead and see the statics reports in terms of number of highly approved, the priority which are high, low, and medium. You can see the statistical report. You can play with the reports as you want. And if I click on the high, it will go and distill out all the records. If I click on the records, it is going to, if I click on the record, it's going to basically go to the corresponding module, show you the requirement. So it is a detailed these reports are just not static. You can drill down the report and go to the granular level where exactly this requirement is. It is very powerful. And once everything is done on the dashboard, we are making sure all the communications within the team is being captured and nothing is being wasted on the emails or missed out in the emails. Everything is in front of you. All is web-based. And finally, when all the job is done well, then the management team will call you and say that, can you generate a report out of the system? Answer is yes. So you can generate out of box, you can generate the reports. So if you just go to any one of the modules and deselect the view so that you can see only the information. And then you have an option here to generate reports. So you can create report of traceability, how the stakeholder, contractor, and subcontract report are been linked. You can generate a report. You can click a audit report and create a report of audit history, what all the changes are, so on and so forth. If I'm talking about report audit history, I'm sure that baselining, comparison of baseline is a single term which we call as freeze the document, and I can keep on having a different version. Can you compare? All those things are possible. So I'm just showing you one of the output of the traceability report, which is out of the box, and you can basically customize. It will give you the package name. It will tell you which person has done it. Table of content can be customized with the logos. And if you scroll down onto this, it will see that which is atomic requirement, how it has been linked, and so on. So basically, in a quick session, I'm basically trying to cover all the acts which I was trying to say: importing of the document, editing of the document, seeing the information in attributes, seeing the linkage information, collaborating by reviewing it, managing using the dashboard, and finally, but not the least, generating the report. I'm sure this is I'm like a high-speed railway.
Thank you very much for covering in such a short time. I know how difficult it is. You're so much into the subject. I know it's difficult to stop you, but I think you did a very good job, a fabulous job in covering requirements management, and how this tool can really seamlessly transform a Word document to a seamless working environment in IBM engineering solution, how traceability, impact analysis, all that can work together. And importantly, collaboration features and dashboard features were very interesting, particularly for me, and I think audience will definitely get benefit out of this. And all of you, whoever you have any questions, please type in your Q&A box quickly. We will start answering your questions very shortly. And thank you once again for all the patience. And so now we will quickly move on to Q&A, and these are our quick reference contacts in case if you have any further questions or details and ask, so you can reach out to any of us. We are more than happy to contact you and provide you additional information, whatever you need. So now the forum is open for Q&A. I have already received many questions, and we've started answering them. And let's go through a couple of questions for now. And we had many questions. So the first question is to Iran. So here's a question which basically talks about what typically the challenges that are addressed in the requirements management for rail projects through your platform, the platform that you mentioned now.
Yep.
What are, in summary, what are the challenges that you're trying to address in that platform?
Okay, so the first one is how multiple stakeholders that need to agree on contractual requirements, how they collaborate at the fine-grained level. So requirement by requirement, typically there needs to be a negotiation and between contractor and let's say the consulting agency that specify the requirement. So how we do this negotiation process and how we get to finalize requirement document where there is an ongoing collaboration between the two parties. And this whole process is facilitated. The second thing is for all the different contractors to see or to be able to access and put their data back into a central repository. So we are all sure what is the trusted state of the data. Mm-hmm. If we just exchange documents, then documents can spread around. I can have one version of the document, someone else can have another version of the documents, and there is no. It's not always clear what is the latest correct baseline of the data. So make sure everyone is on the same baseline. Another thing is we mentioned the traceability. Traceability is something that you don't do with document, and this has to do with the relationship between what I ask the contractor to do to something at the stakeholder level. And so the traceability is very important to make sure that things are consistent from the level of the stakeholder to the level of the contractor of a specific work package that he needs to do. So I need to do on one hand that the work packages that I delivered cover all the requirements, including the regulatory requirements. So I need to know that they all cover everything from regulations to risks to everything is covered. And this is done by traceability and linking. So linking is something which is critical to properly manage this entire thing. So again, we come back, it's the collaboration, making sure that we have coverage of data as we go from the high level to the contractor level. And then we mentioned also changes. So when we make a change, let's say we got a new regulation or some new input to the system, and there was a high-level stakeholder requirements change, it may propagate all the way down to all the contractors, or maybe some contractors. So that system automatically shows us which contractor is impacted or which contractor requirements are impacted by this change of requirement. Again, this is something that you cannot do, or it's difficult to do with traditional document-based system. In a traditional document system, you are all relying on people memory and people remembering what pieces are allocated in where, and it's all based on lots of iterations and reviews, and many times there are gaps. I mean, things remain inconsistent.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Iran. Thank you for that elaborate answer on that. Next, I have another question. I would like Murli to answer this question. Murli, here is a question. We don't have too much of focus on in-house IT infrastructure. Can we have these solutions on cloud? Is there an option?
Yeah. Hi, Dhananjaya. Yeah. So, this solution is available both on cloud as a SaaS offering and as well as an on-prem offering. So, yes, both options are available. So you can definitely have the solution on a cloud platform, on IBM Cloud Platform as a SaaS offering.
Okay, good. And I think there was one more question. Murali, if you want to take that. Most of our requirements analysts are not formal requirements authors. Does your solution provide any recommendation or best practices in writing requirements?
Okay. There are 2 or 3 ways to look at this. One is within the tool itself, there are quite a number of industry standard templates that are available, like a good starting point where you can start authoring the requirement. That's one way to look at it. Second, if the organization is having certain templates which they are following, then probably they can reuse those templates. Third most important thing is, as Iran was mentioning in his presentation, the tool has the AI capabilities. So the solution offering, what we are talking about, does have the AI capabilities where we are leveraging our Watson engine, where it does demonstrate certain principles and guidelines based on the INCOSE standards on how to write requirements. So if certain persons have written certain requirements, you can get the requirements reviewed with the AI engine, which gives a scoring and also aids the client to improve that requirement the way the requirement is written. And the fourth one, the last but not the least, definitely we have certain out-of-the-box course materials that are there, which will also give a kind of a guidance in terms of what are the best ways to document or capture the requirements, best principles of writing requirements. Yeah, okay. These are some of the ways in which we can address.
Yeah, thanks, Murali. Thanks. Well answered. I have one more question. If Naveen is there, you can quickly answer this question. Naveen, there's a question. I like this platform, but would like my large team at my office to see the detailed features of this platform. How can you help us, and how do you assist us with the evaluation? Naveen?
Definitely, we can assist you on this in terms if you wanted to evaluate or see a detailed demo. So you can reach out to any of us and we can arrange a detailed demo of the solution, and possibly we can even look at an assisted evaluation facility where our SMEs will help the team to evaluate the tool as per the requirement.
Okay. Thank you. And I have many other questions, but unfortunately we have left no time. Definitely all the questions will be answered. We will reach out to you. We will send you written responses to all your questions. Once again, I'd like to thank the audience plus the panelists and the speakers for making it for today. And we started off with a wonderful case study by Andreas, and then followed by a beautiful enlightening discussions from the panelists discussed about digitization importance and how each one of these organizations have taken their own steps. And then we did talk about how IBM engineering platform is contributing to this digital transformation, and we saw a quick demo of it, and it was a beautiful day for me particularly. I hope the same with you. Thank you once again. We will shortly come up with another webinar to enlighten all of you more on this topic. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you all.
Thank you all the panelists.